The first time I saw humans in combat, I thought they were insane. My name is Zethkar, and I am a Valonian warrior. Our species has conquered 17 star systems through superior technology and tactical brilliance. We pride ourselves on logical warfare, calculated risks, and overwhelming firepower. When the Galactic Council assigned human soldiers to our unit, I expected them to follow our proven methods. I was wrong about everything. The assignment came during the Drakmari invasion of the Kepler sector. These creatures were unlike anything we had faced before. They stood 12 feet tall, with chitinous armor that could deflect plasma rounds and claws that could slice through titanium like paper. Their ships were biological nightmares that regenerated damage faster than we could inflict it. Traditional Valonian tactics were failing miserably. We need unconventional approaches, Commander Veltar announced during the briefing. The humans have experienced fighting impossible odds. I scoffed internally. Humans were a young species, barely 3 centuries into space travel. Their technology was primitive compared to ours. What could they possibly teach us? The human contingent arrived on our flagship the next day. 50 soldiers led by a woman named Captain Sarah Martinez. She was unremarkable by Valonian standards, standing only 6 feet tall, with soft pink skin and strange hair that changed color in different light. Her weapons were crude projectile firearms mixed with basic energy weapons. Captain Martinez, Commander Veltar, greeted her formally. "Your reputation precedes you. Just call me Sarah," she replied with a casual smile that confused me. In Valonian culture, military titles were sacred. This informality seemed disrespectful. During the strategy meeting, she studied our tactical displays with intense focus. The Drakmari had established 3 strongholds on the planet Zirian. 7, each one a fortress of living bone and metal that adapted to our attacks. Standard approach would be orbital bombardment followed by ground assault. I explained to her. We softened their defenses, then advanced with heavy armor support. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "How many attempts have you made?" 7, I admitted reluctantly. Each assault failed. The fortresses heal faster than we can damage them. What about their supply lines? They don't appear to have any. The structures are self-sustaining. Sarah stood up and walked to the holographic display. She rotated the image, studying it from every angle. "They're not fortresses," she said quietly. "They're organisms, living creatures." "We know this already," I replied impatiently. "That's why conventional weapons are ineffective." "No, you don't understand." She pointed to specific areas on the display. "These aren't just biological structures. They're pregnant." The room fell silent. I stared at the tactical readout, seeing nothing unusual. "Explain." "Look at the energy signatures here, here, and here." She highlighted 3 distinct areas. "These are nurseries. The Drakmari aren't just building strongholds. They're breeding." Commander Veltar leaned forward. "If that's true, then time is not on our side." "Exactly. Every day we wait, there are more of them." Sarah's voice carried a weight that made my scales tingle with unease. "We can't win through attrition. We need to strike at their heart. The central core of each structure is heavily defended." I protested. "It would be suicide to attempt a direct assault." Sarah smiled, but it wasn't the casual expression from earlier. This smile carried something darker, more determined. "That's where you're wrong. It wouldn't be suicide. It would be courage." Over the next 3 days, I watched the humans prepare for what I considered an impossible mission. They didn't use our advanced training simulators or tactical computers. Instead, they gathered in small groups, sharing stories and laughing together. They wrote messages on paper, sealed them in waterproof containers, and gave them to their friends. "What are those?" I asked Sarah during one of these gatherings. "Letters home," she replied simply, "in case we don't make it back." The casualness with which she discussed potential death disturbed me. Valonians approached mortality with solemn ritual and careful preparation. Humans seem to treat it like an everyday possibility. "Are you not afraid?" I asked. Sarah considered this for a moment. Terrified, she admitted. "But fear isn't the opposite of courage. Cowardice is." I didn't understand the distinction. The assault began at dawn. The plan was insane by any logical standard. Instead of the massive coordinated attack I expected, Sarah divided her forces into tiny units of 5 soldiers each. They would infiltrate the Drakmarie structures simultaneously, moving through the narrowest passages to avoid detection. This violates every principle of tactical warfare, I told her as we prepared to deploy. You're splitting your force against a superior enemy in fortified positions. Sometimes the best way to win is to do exactly what your enemy thinks is impossible, she replied, checking her weapon one final time. I had volunteered to accompany her unit, partly out of curiosity and partly out of duty. As we approached the first Drakmarie structure in our small transport, I felt my confidence wavering. The fortress loomed before us like a mountain of bone and flesh, its surface crawling with defensive organisms that tracked our approach. Landing zone is hot, our pilot reported as plasma bursts erupted around us. I can't get you close to the entry point. How close can you get us? Sarah asked calmly. Maybe 2 kilometers. But that's through open ground with no cover. Perfect. Perfect? I stared at her in disbelief. 2 kilometers of exposed terrain under heavy fire was the definition of a death sentence. We rappelled from the transport under a storm of enemy fire. The moment my feet hit the ground, I saw 3 of the other human teams charging across the rocky landscape toward their targets. They moved with purpose, but not recklessness, using every depression and boulder for cover. Stay low, move fast, Sarah instructed as we began our own advance. The defensive systems are designed for large formations. They'll have trouble tracking individual soldiers. As we ran, I watched the humans around me. They didn't move like Valonian warriors with measured steps and calculated positioning. Instead, they flowed across the battlefield like water, adapting instantly to changing conditions. When plasma bursts forced them to dive for cover, they rolled and came up running in new directions. When obstacles blocked their path, they vaulted over or crawled under without breaking stride. Most remarkably, they protected each other without being asked. When one soldier's equipment failed, another immediately shared their supplies. When someone was injured, the nearest human provided aid without waiting for orders. This wasn't tactical coordination, it was something deeper. We reached the base of the fortress after 20 minutes of harrowing advance. The entry point was a sphincter-like opening that dilated and contracted irregularly. Defensive tendrils writhed around it like angry snakes. Zethkar, can you disrupt those neural pathways? Sarah asked, pointing to the biological defense systems. I raised my plasma rifle and fired precisely targeted shots at the nerve clusters I could identify. The tendrils spasmed and went limp. Sarah immediately dove through the opening, and her team followed without hesitation. Inside the fortress was a nightmare of organic corridors that pulsed with alien life. The walls secreted digestive acids that hissed when they contacted our equipment. Sensor organs tracked our movement, and antibody creatures began responding to our presence. This way, Sarah whispered, consulting a handheld scanner. The nursery should be 3 levels down. As we descended through the living structure, I began to understand something that had eluded me during the briefings. The humans weren't just following a battle plan. They were improvising constantly. When acid blocked one passage, they found another. When antibody creatures attacked, they adapted their tactics instantly. How do you know what to do? I asked Sarah as we paused in a relatively safe chamber. Your species has never encountered anything like this before. Neither have you, she pointed out. The difference is that we're used to facing the unknown. Human history is full of impossible situations that somehow got resolved. Through superior technology? Better tactics? Sarah shook her head. Through people who refused to give up when everything seemed hopeless. We reached the nursery level and found something that made my blood freeze. The chamber stretched beyond the range of our lights, filled with thousands of egg sacs in various stages of development. Each one contained a developing Drakmarie warrior. At the current rate of maturation, they would hatch within days. There are too many, I whispered. Even if we destroy half of them, the survivors will overwhelm the colony. Then we destroy all of them, Sarah replied firmly. Impossible. Our explosives aren't sufficient for complete destruction. Sarah activated her communicator. Martinez to all teams. Status report. Team 2 in position, came the first response. Nursery is huge. Thousands of targets. Team 3 ready, reported another voice. Same situation here. All 10 teams had successfully reached their objectives despite the impossible odds. But the scope of what we faced was overwhelming. Here's what we're going to do, Sarah announced. We're going to overload our power cells and create a chain reaction. The biological nature of these structures means the explosion will spread through the neural networks connecting all 3 fortresses. I stared at her in horror. That would require us to remain here during the detonation. The blast would kill us, yes. Sarah's voice was steady, but it would also save the colony and prevent the Drachmarie from spreading to other systems. This is madness. There must be another way. Maybe, Sarah admitted, but we don't have time to find it. Every minute we delay, more eggs approach hatching. Through our communicators, I could hear the other human teams discussing the plan. Not one voice expressed doubt or fear. They talked about technical details, timing sequences, and final messages for their families. They accepted the necessity of sacrifice with a calmness that left me speechless. Zethkar, Sarah said gently, you don't have to stay. Your people need to know what happened here. I looked at these humans who had infiltrated an impossible target and found a way to complete an impossible mission through impossible means. They were about to give their lives to save people they had never met on a world they barely knew. For the first time in my life, I understood the difference between bravery and courage. Bravery was charging into battle despite fear. Courage was choosing to do what was right despite the cost. I'm staying, I announced, my voice surprising me with its steadiness. Sarah looked at me with those strange human eyes that seemed to change color with her emotions. Zethkar, you don't understand. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. I checked my equipment one final time. I've spent my entire military career believing that courage meant having the best weapons and the strongest armor. You show me something different. Through our communicators, we could hear the other teams beginning their preparations. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Each team would overload their power cells simultaneously, creating a cascade of explosions that would travel through the biological neural networks connecting all 3 fortresses. The entire Drachmarie installation would be destroyed in moments. Final countdown begins in 10 minutes, Sarah announced to all teams. Use this time to make peace with whatever gods you serve. I watched as the humans around me settled into quiet contemplation. Some closed their eyes and moved their lips silently. Others wrote final messages in small notebooks. One young soldier named Marcus pulled out a photograph of a woman holding a small child. Your family? I asked. My wife Elena and my son David. His voice carried a mixture of love and sorrow. David just learned to walk last month. Elena sent me a video of his first steps. Why did you volunteer for this mission? The question came out before I could stop it. Marcus smiled, the same expression I had seen on Sarah's face. Because if I don't, David might never get the chance to run. The simplicity of his answer struck me like a physical blow. Human logic was completely different from Valonian reasoning. We calculated acceptable losses, strategic advantages, and probability matrices. Humans seemed to operate on principles I was only beginning to understand. Team leaders, report status, Sarah called out. Team 2 ready for detonation sequence. Came the response from Lieutenant Rodriguez. Been an honor serving with you all. Team 3 standing by, reported Sergeant Chun. See you on the other side. One by one, all teams confirmed their readiness. In a nursery chamber around us, the egg sacs continued their slow pulsing, unaware that their entire species' expansion into this sector was about to end. Zethkar, Sarah said quietly, I need to ask you something. What is it? If we don't succeed, if something goes wrong with the detonation, I need you to get back to your ship and orbital bombard this entire site. Don't let sentiment or honor code stop you. Promise me. I understood what she was asking. If the chain reaction failed, I would have to complete the mission by destroying the entire area, including any human survivors who might be trapped inside. It was a logical, tactical decision wrapped in the most painful emotional context I had ever encountered. I promise, I said. Sarah nodded and activated her final countdown sequence. All teams, this is Martinez. Detonation in 60 seconds. It has been my privilege to serve alongside each of you. The responses came back immediately, voices steady despite what was coming. Privilege was ours, Captain. Giving hell, Sada. See you in Valhalla. I didn't understand that last reference, but the tone conveyed everything necessary. As the countdown reached 30 seconds, something unexpected happened. The fortress began to shudder around us. The walls started secreting different chemicals, and the lighting changed from the sickly green we had navigated by to a harsh red. They know we're here, Marcus reported, checking his scanner. The entire structure is going into defensive mode. How is that possible? I asked. We've been careful to avoid triggering major immune responses. Sarah's expression hardened. They're not responding to us. They're responding to our countdown timers. The biological systems can sense the energy buildup in our power cells. This was a catastrophic development. If the fortress could detect our preparations, it could take countermeasures. Worse, it might communicate with the other two structures and warn them of the impending attack. All teams, emergency protocol, Sarah announced. The structures are aware of our presence. We need to accelerate the timeline. How long do we have? Rodriguez asked. Sarah checked her readings. Maybe 90 seconds before they isolate us in containment fields. If that happens, we won't be able to create the neural cascade we need. 90 seconds. The power cells needed at least 3 minutes to reach critical overload. The mathematics were impossible. There's another option, I said slowly. Valonian power cells can be manually destabilized by overriding their safety protocols. The explosion would be immediate but less controlled, meaning we might not achieve the chain reaction between all three structures. But we would definitely destroy this one and everything in it. Sarah considered this for approximately 2 seconds. Do it. All teams switch to manual destabilization. We might not get them all, but we'll get as many as we can. The humans around me began rapidly reconfiguring their equipment. Their movements were precise and efficient, showing no signs of the panic I would have expected from soldiers facing imminent death with a compromised plan. Zethkar, Sarah said as she worked on her power cell, I need to ask you something else. What? When you get back to your people, don't just tell them what we did. Tell them why we did it. I don't think I fully understand why myself. Sarah paused in her work and looked directly at me. Because some things are worth dying for, but more importantly, some things are worth living for. Every person we save today gets to continue their story. They get to love someone, create something, discover something, help someone else. We're not just preventing deaths, we're preserving possibilities. The fortress shuddered more violently, and I could hear the approaching sound of defensive organisms responding to our presence. Whatever immune response the structure was mounting, we had very little time left. Manual destabilization ready, Marcus reported. Same here, came voices from around the chamber. All teams report, Sarah ordered. The responses came quickly. 7 of the 10 teams confirmed they were ready for manual detonation. The other 3 had encountered complications. Team 4 is pinned down by antibody creatures, came Lieutenant Morrison's voice. We can't reach our target location. Team 7 reporting massive structural changes, added Corporal Williams. The passage to our nursery has been sealed. Team 9 is... The transmission cut off in a burst of static. Sarah's jaw tightened. 5 teams might not be enough to ensure complete destruction. The chain reaction needs critical mass across all 3 structures. Then, we need to create more explosion points, I said, understanding beginning to dawn. Multiple detonations within each structure. That would require splitting up our remaining teams, reducing our defensive capabilities. It would also increase our chances of mission success. Sarah nodded grimly. Marcus, Williams, you're with me. We're going to create a secondary detonation point deeper in the structure. Zethkar, can you handle the manual override for our primary location? I stared at the human power cell configuration. It was different from Valonian technology, but the principles were similar. Yes, but you won't have enough time to reach a safe distance. We're not planning to reach a safe distance. Of course they weren't. These humans had redefined my understanding of tactical thinking. They didn't calculate survival probabilities because survival wasn't their primary objective. Mission completion was. As Sarah and her two companions prepared to venture deeper into the fortress, alarms began echoing through the organic corridors. The Drachmae were fully aware of our presence now, and the structure was mounting a comprehensive immune response. I told Sarah, I'll handle the detonation here. She gripped my shoulder in what I was beginning to recognize as a human gesture of respect and affection. Thank you for understanding, Zethkar. As they disappeared into the pulsing corridors, I found myself alone with the power cell array and thousands of Drachmae eggs. The weight of responsibility settled on me like armor I had never worn before. Through the communicator, I could hear fragments of status reports from the other teams. Some were successfully reaching their targets. Others were encountering increasing resistance. The humans' voices remained steady throughout, even when reporting casualties or equipment failures. Team 2 has lost Morrison, came one report. Continuing with reduced personnel. Team 6 reporting successful placement, came another. Beginning countdown sequence. I realized that I was witnessing something unprecedented in my military experience. These humans were executing a mission that was failing by every tactical measure, yet they continued forward because the strategic objective remained achievable. They accepted losses, adapted to complications, and pressed on because they understood something about warfare that we Valonians had missed. War wasn't just about defeating enemies. It was about protecting what you valued. The fortress shuddered again, more violently this time. Through my scanner, I could see massive structural changes occurring throughout the complex. The Drachmae were attempting to isolate different sections, probably to limit the damage from our planned explosions. Sarah, can you hear me? I called into my communicator. Barely. The interference is getting worse. Her voice came through layers of static. We've reached the secondary target. Beginning placement now. The structure is compartmentalizing. They're trying to prevent cascade failures. Understood. We'll have to create a bigger bang than originally planned. A bigger bang. I looked at the power cells around me and realized what that meant. Instead of a controlled chain reaction, we would need to create an explosion powerful enough to overwhelm the fortress's defensive isolation protocols. Sarah, that level of detonation will guarantee mission success, she interrupted. Do it, Zethkar. I began reconfiguring not just the human power cells, but also my own Valonian equipment. The combined explosion would be massive, far beyond anything we had originally planned. It would certainly achieve our objectives. It would also make survival completely impossible for anyone inside the structure as I worked to configure the enhanced detonation sequence. Something extraordinary happened. The fortress around us began to change in ways I had never seen before. The walls started pulsing with new rhythms, and bioluminescent patterns appeared across the organic surfaces. Through my translator, I began to pick up what sounded like communication signals. The Drachmae were attempting to make contact. Zethkar, are you receiving this? Sarah's voice crackled through the interference. Yes. It appears they want to communicate, probably try and negotiate. Standard procedure when a hive mind realizes it's facing destruction. But something about the signals didn't match that assessment. The patterns were complex, almost musical. They reminded me of something I couldn't quite place. All teams, hold detonation, Sarah ordered. Let's hear what they have to say. The translation came through slowly as our computers struggled to interpret the alien communication method. When a meaning became clear, it changed everything. We understand Your purpose, the translated voice said. We acknowledge your courage. I exchanged glances with Marcus, who was monitoring the communications array. This wasn't a negotiation or a plea for mercy. It was something else entirely. Continue translation, Sarah ordered. We came here to expand, to grow, to continue our species. You came here to protect, to preserve, to continue yours. We are not different. The fortress continued its strange pulsing, and more translation came through. We have observed your actions. Small groups, great danger, certain death. You choose this for others. This is not logical. This is beautiful. Sarah's voice was thoughtful when she responded. Can you translate our communications to them? Attempting to establish two-way communication, Marcus reported. After a few moments, he nodded. Channel is open, Captain. Sarah spoke slowly and clearly. We don't want to destroy your species. We want to protect ours. The response came more quickly now. We understand. Your small forms contain vast courage. We have not encountered this before. I found myself fascinated by this development. In all of our tactical planning, no one had considered the possibility of communication with the Drachmae. We had assumed they were simple predators expanding through biological imperative. What do you propose? Sarah asked. We will withdraw from this system. We will seek uninhabited worlds for expansion. Your courage has taught us. Taught you what? That some things are worth preserving. That small sacrifices can protect large possibilities. We did not understand this concept before. Marcus looked at his scanner and frowned. Captain, I'm reading massive energy discharges from the other two structures. They're beginning to shut down their breeding operations. Through our long-range communicators, we could hear reports from the other teams. The Drachmae were voluntarily evacuating their positions, taking their developed offspring with them, but leaving the immature eggs behind in stasis. Why are you doing this? Sarah asked. Because you showed us a different way to continue. Not just to reproduce and spread, but to choose meaning, to value the continuation of others, not just ourselves. I stared at the nursery chamber around us. Thousands of eggs that would never hatch, a potential army that would never threaten the colonies. The humans had achieved their objective without firing a single shot. But that wasn't entirely accurate. They had fired shots. They had fought their way through impossible defenses, infiltrated impenetrable positions, and prepared to sacrifice their lives for people they would never meet. The Drachmae had witnessed all of that. Your species confuses us, the alien voice continued. You are physically weak, physiologically inferior, numerically disadvantaged. Yet you accomplish what stronger species cannot. How? Sarah asked. You fight for others more fiercely than we fight for ourselves. This is new data. We must consider its implications. Over the next several hours, we witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. The Drachmae voluntarily dismantled their invasion infrastructure and began preparing to leave the system. Their communication with us continued throughout the process, and I began to understand why the humans had made such an impression on them. We are a hive mind, the Drachmae explained. Individual sacrifice for the whole is automatic, programmed. You are individuals who choose to sacrifice for others. This requires decision. Will. These concepts are fascinating to us. You're saying you want to learn about individual choice? Sarah asked. Yes. We wish to experiment with this concept, to see if it makes us more than we are. I watched Sarah consider this response. The tactical situation had changed completely. Instead of facing an implacable enemy bent on expansion, we were dealing with a species capable of philosophical growth. What guarantee do we have that you won't simply resume your expansion once you've learned what you want to know? Sarah asked. You have our word. But, more importantly, you have taught us that expansion without meaning is empty. We seek now to expand our understanding, not just our territory. Marcus shook his head in amazement. Captain, they're actually asking for permission to establish a research station in the outer system. They want to study our colonies from a distance to better understand human behavior. The irony wasn't lost on me. The humans had infiltrated the Drachmae positions to destroy them. The Drachmae now wanted to observe human positions to learn from them. Sarah, I said quietly, this could be the beginning of something entirely new in galactic relations. She nodded thoughtfully. Or it could be the most elaborate deception in military history. But somehow I don't think so. Why not? Because they're asking to learn about choice, not demanding surrender. A deceptive species would promise compliance, not request education. Through our communicators, we received word that Commander Veltar and the Galactic Council representatives were monitoring our communications. The political implications of this first contact scenario were enormous. Captain Martinez, came Veltar's voice, you are authorized to negotiate preliminary terms for observation status. This is now a diplomatic mission, not a military operation. Sarah smiled, that same expression that had confused me when we first met. Understood, Commander. Beginning diplomatic protocols. Over the following hours, I watched Sarah and her team transition from warriors preparing to die to diplomats establishing the framework for an entirely new type of interspecies relationship. The Drachmae would relocate to the outer system, where they would establish a research facility dedicated to studying the concept of individual choice and voluntary sacrifice. In return, human volunteers would provide cultural exchange opportunities, allowing the Drachmae to observe human decision-making processes in non-military contexts. It was an unprecedented arrangement that would require approval from multiple galactic governments. There is one more thing we must ask, the Drachmae said as we prepared to leave their fortress. What is it? Sarah replied. The one called Zethkar. We observed that he chose to remain when he could have departed safely. His species did not originally display this choice behavior. How did this change occur? All eyes turned to me. I realized that the Drachmae had been monitoring our entire infiltration, observing not just our actions, but our decision-making processes. They had watched a Valonian warrior learn about human courage in real time. I learned it from them, I said simply. The humans showed me that there are things worth choosing, even when the choice is difficult. This learning across species, this is also new data. We wish to understand how courage can be transmitted from one individual to another. Sarah looked at me with something that might have been pride. That's something humans call inspiration, Zethkar. It's one of our most powerful abilities. As we finally left the Drachmae fortress, I reflected on everything that had changed in just a few days. I had arrived expecting to observe primitive human tactics. Instead, I had participated in the first successful conversion of a hostile species through demonstration of moral courage rather than superior firepower. The other human teams emerged from the remaining two structures, reporting similar experiences. The Drachmae had made contact with each group, expressing the same fascination with human decision-making and voluntary sacrifice. Team leaders, report casualties, Sarah ordered as we regrouped at the extraction point. Team 2, 0 casualties. Team 3, 0 casualties. Team 5, 0 casualties. One by one, all teams reported in. Not a single human had been lost in an operation that should have resulted in total casualties. They had achieved their objective of stopping the Drachmae expansion, established first contact with a previously hostile species, and created the foundation for a new type of diplomatic relationship, all because they have been willing to choose courage over safety. Zethkar, Sarah said as we waited for extraction, I have a question for you. What is it? When you go back to your people, what will you tell them about what happened here? I thought about this carefully. How could I explain that everything we thought we knew about effective military strategy had been proven wrong? That sometimes the most powerful weapon was the willingness to choose sacrifice for others? I will tell them that humans fight with more than weapons and technology. You fight with something that can change the minds of your enemies. And what is that? The proof that some things are worth choosing, even when the choice is hard. Sarah nodded, satisfied. That's the most important lesson anyone can learn. As our transport arrived to take us back to the fleet, I realized that my understanding of courage had been fundamentally altered. I had always thought courage meant being unafraid. But I had learned that true courage meant being afraid and choosing to act anyway, not for yourself, but for something larger than yourself. The humans had taught the Drachmarie about choice, but they had taught me something even more profound, that courage wasn't just an individual trait. It was something that could be shared, learned, and passed from one being to another across species lines. That was the most human thing of all 6 months after the Zirian 7 incident. I found myself assigned to a joint task force investigating reports of unusual activity in the frontier sectors. What made this assignment remarkable wasn't the mission itself, but my commanding officer, Captain Sarah Martinez. The Galactic Council had decided the human-alien cooperation needed to be tested in various scenarios beyond the unique circumstances of the Drachmarie encounter. I had specifically requested assignment to Martinez's unit, much to the surprise of my Valonian superiors. You wish to serve under a human commander? Admiral Kethvar had asked during my assignment interview. This is highly irregular for a Valonian officer of your rank. I wish to learn more about their tactical approaches. I had replied diplomatically. The truth was more complex. The humans had shown me something about leadership that transcended traditional command structures, and I wanted to understand it better. Now, aboard the exploration vessel Endeavor, I served as tactical advisor to a mixed crew of humans, Valonians, Centauri, and even 2 Drachmarie observers. The ship itself was a marvel of collaborative engineering, combining technologies from multiple species into something that was more effective than any single species design. Our current mission involved investigating a distress signal from the mining colony on Kestros Prime. The signal had been repeating for 3 weeks, but no rescue vessels had been able to reach the planet due to severe gravitational anomalies that had appeared around the star system. Tactical assessment, Zethkar? Sarah asked as we reviewed the sensor data in the briefing room. I studied the displays carefully. The gravitational distortions appear to be artificial in nature. They're too precisely positioned to be natural phenomena. Agreed. What does that suggest to you? Either the mining operation has destabilized something on the planet, or there's a third party involved that doesn't want anyone reaching Kestros Prime. Lieutenant Chun, who had been with Sarah during the Drachmarie mission, leaned forward. Could be pirates using some kind of gravity generation technology to isolate the colony. Pirates would want escape routes, I pointed out. These distortions would trap them as effectively as they trap potential rescuers. Dr. Thekmar, one of the Drachmarie observers, spoke for the first time during the briefing. His communication came through the translation system as precise but slightly musical tones. We concur with the assessment of third-party involvement. The pattern of distortions suggests territorial claiming behavior. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. So we're potentially dealing with a species that's decided to claim the Kestros system and doesn't want interference, which would make any rescue attempt an act of war, Chun pointed out, or an act of diplomacy, depending on how we approach it, Sarah replied. Over the following days, I watched Sarah develop an approach to the situation that was uniquely human. Instead of planning a military operation to break through the gravitational barriers or a diplomatic mission to negotiate with potential hostiles, she chose to do both simultaneously. We're going to split into 3 groups, she announced during our final planning session. Group 1 will attempt to penetrate the gravitational distortions using a modified shuttle with enhanced shielding. Group 2 will establish a communication platform at the edge of the anomaly field and attempt to make contact with whoever is responsible. Group 3 will remain with the Endeavor and coordinate both operations. And if the diplomatic approach fails? I asked. Then, Group 1 will already be in position to begin rescue operations while Group 3 provides military support if needed. It was a typically human solution. Prepare for multiple outcomes simultaneously rather than committing entirely to a single approach. But what made it remarkable was the personnel assignments. I'll be leading Group 1, Sarah continued. Zethkar, I want you with Group 2 handling the diplomatic contact. Your experience with the Drachmarie communication protocols could be valuable. I was surprised by this assignment. My tactical expertise would be more useful in the penetration mission, while my diplomatic experience was limited to that single encounter. Captain, wouldn't my skills be better utilized with the infiltration team? Sarah smiled. That familiar expression that I had learned meant she was about to teach me something. Zethkar, what did you learn during the Drakmari incident? That courage can be shared across species lines. Exactly. Now I need you to help me share something else. The understanding that not every problem requires a military solution. Group 2 consisted of myself, Dr. Thekmar, Lieutenant Rodriguez from Engineering, and, surprisingly, Marcus Williams, the young human who had shown me the photograph of his family during the Drakmari mission. Marcus, I said as we prepared our communication platform, your expertise is in combat engineering. Why did Captain Martinez assign you to the diplomatic team? He smiled, the same expression I was learning to recognize in humans. Because sometimes the most important message you can send is that you trust someone enough to put them in a position where fighting isn't the first option. As we positioned our platform at the edge of the gravitational anomaly field, I reflected on this insight. Sarah was deliberately placing her most capable warriors in non-combat roles, demonstrating to potential hostiles that her intentions were genuinely peaceful. The first communication attempts yielded only static and interference. The gravitational distortions were affecting our transmission systems in ways our equipment couldn't compensate for. Try routing the signal through the Drakmari translation matrix, I suggested to Dr. Thekmar. Your species' communication method might be less susceptible to gravitational interference. Dr. Thekmar's optical organs shifted, and what I had learned was their equivalent of surprise. You wish us to serve as intermediaries? If you're willing. Your people have developed communication techniques that we're still learning about. After a few minutes of reconfiguration, we began transmitting a general peaceful contact message through the Drakmari's biological communication system. The response was immediate and startling. Cease intrusion. Territory claimed. Departure required. The message came through in perfect standard galactic, with no translation delays or communication artifacts. Whoever was responsible for the gravitational distortions had been monitoring our communications from the beginning. This is Lieutenant Commander Zethkar of the Joint Exploration Vessel Endeavor, I responded. We are responding to a distress signal from the mining colony on Kestros Prime. We request permission to provide humanitarian assistance. Colony status, irrelevant. System claimed. Departure required. Marcus frowned as he monitored the communication patterns. Commander, I'm reading massive energy signatures from multiple points around the star system. Whatever's generating those gravitational fields has some serious firepower backing it up. Can you identify the source species? Negative. The technology signature doesn't match anything in our databases. Dr. Thekmar's communication organs pulsed with urgent patterns. Commander Zethkar, we are detecting familiar resonances in their transmission methods. Familiar how? Similar to our own pre-contact communication protocols. This species may be experiencing first contact procedures. This put the situation in an entirely new context. If we were dealing with a species that had never encountered galactic civilization before, their territorial response might be defensive rather than aggressive. They could be protecting themselves from what they perceived as an invasion. Unknown vessels, I transmitted. We are part of a galactic alliance of multiple species working together peacefully. We do not claim territory. We provide assistance to beings in distress. The colony on Kestros Prime sent a distress signal requesting help. The response came after a longer delay this time. Galactic Alliance, multiple species, cooperation. Yes, our crew includes humans, Valonians, Centauri, and Drakmari working together. We represent peaceful cooperation between different species. Another long pause. Then, Drakmari present? Recent contact reports indicate Drakmari. Learning behavior. Dr. Thekmar's optical organs brightened. They have been monitoring our diplomatic channels. This species has observed our recent agreement with your alliance. This was an unexpected development. The unknown species had been watching galactic communications and had specifically taken note of the Drakmari transformation from aggressive expansion to cooperative research. Yes, I responded. The Drachmae are now research partners studying voluntary cooperation between individuals and species. Would you be interested in learning more about this alliance? The gravitational distortions around the system began to fluctuate. Through our sensors, we could see the patterns shifting, becoming less intense. Colony distress. Genuine? Yes. The mining operation reported equipment failures and requested evacuation assistance. We have no territorial interest in your system. Demonstrate. Cooperation. I wasn't sure what they meant by this request. How would you like us to demonstrate cooperation? Drachmae entity. Approach alone. No weapons. Show trust. Dr. Thekmar's communication organs pulsed rapidly. They wish for us to demonstrate the trust that enables cooperation. This is dangerous but logical. You don't have to do this, Marcus said. We can find another way to establish communication. No, Dr. Thekmar replied. This is exactly the type of choice that humans taught us about. Individual risk for group benefit. We will demonstrate what we have learned. As Dr. Thekmar prepared a small shuttle for solo approach, I contacted Sarah to update her on the diplomatic developments. Unknown species, possible first contact, requesting trust demonstration, I reported. Dr. Thekmar is volunteering to approach alone. Understood, Sarah replied. Group 1 has reached the planetary atmosphere. The distress signal is definitely legitimate. Multiple equipment failures, no immediate danger to personnel, but they need evacuation within 48 hours. Any sign of the unknown species on the planet? Negative. Whatever they are, they're keeping their distance from the surface. Proceed with diplomatic contact. We'll maintain rescue readiness. As Dr. Thekmar's shuttle disappeared into the gravitational field, Marcus and I monitored the communication channels. For 20 minutes, we heard nothing. Then, Dr. Thekmar's voice came through clearly. Contact established. Species identification, Korthani. Recent emergence from isolation period. They have been observing galactic communications for approximately 1 standard year. Status? I asked. They are curious about voluntary cooperation. They wish to understand how multiple species can work together without forced hierarchy. They have agreed to provide safe passage for rescue operations in exchange for cultural exchange opportunity. Rodriguez looked up from his engineering station. Commander, the gravitational distortions are dissipating around a corridor leading directly to Kestro's Prime. We have a clear approach route. Through our long-range communicators, I could hear Sarah's team beginning their descent to the planet. The rescue operation was proceeding smoothly thanks to the diplomatic breakthrough. Dr. Thekmar, what do the Korthani want in terms of cultural exchange? They wish to observe our cooperation methods firsthand. They request permission to embed observers with our crew during the rescue operation. This was moving fast, but it followed the same pattern as our encounter with the Drachmae. A potentially hostile species had revealed themselves to be curious about galactic civilization, specifically about the cooperative relationships they had observed. Approved, I responded. Request that they provide minimal security escort for their observers. We want to demonstrate trust, but we also want to ensure everyone's safety. Over the next several hours, I watched another first contact situation unfold. The Korthani were physically similar to humans, but with additional sensory organs that allowed them to perceive gravitational fields directly. They had developed technology based on gravitational manipulation rather than energy projection or matter manipulation. Their observers integrated with our rescue teams and witnessed humans, Valonians, Centauri, and Drachmae working together to evacuate the mining colony. They were particularly fascinated by the way different species contributed different capabilities to achieve common objectives. Your species puzzle us greatly, the lead Korthani observer told Sarah as the evacuation concluded. You appear to gain strength from diversity rather than being weakened by it. That's exactly what we gain, Sarah replied. Each species brings capabilities that others lack. Together, we can solve problems that none of us could handle alone. This requires significant trust. Yes, and trust requires courage. The courage to be vulnerable with others for the sake of something larger than yourself. I listened to this exchange and realized that Sarah was once again demonstrating the lesson she had taught me. Courage wasn't just about individual action. It was about the willingness to build relationships that transcended individual limitations. The Korthani requested permission to establish formal diplomatic contact with the Galactic Council. Like the Drachmarie, they were interested in learning more about voluntary cooperation rather than expanding through territorial acquisition. As we prepared to return to Council space with the rescued miners and our new diplomatic contacts, Sarah asked me the same question she had posed after the Drachmarie incident. What will you tell your people about what happened here? This time, I had a clearer answer. I will tell them that courage is contagious. When one species demonstrates the willingness to choose cooperation over conquest, it inspires others to make the same choice 3 years after the Kestros Prime incident. I stood before the Galactic Council as the newly appointed ambassador of cooperative relations, a position that hadn't existed before humans introduced the concept of diplomatic courage. My role was to facilitate first contact situations where hostile species might be transformed into cooperative partners through demonstration rather than force. The position had been created after the success with the Drachmarie, and Korthani led to 17 additional species requesting voluntary integration into galactic civilization. Each contact had followed a similar pattern. Initial hostility or territorial behavior, human-led diplomatic initiatives demonstrating cooperative courage, and eventual transformation of potential enemies into research or cultural partners. Today's briefing concerned the most challenging situation we had faced yet. The Nexari Empire has declared war on the entire Galactic Council, Admiral Kethvar announced grimly. They command a fleet of over 3,000 vessels and have already conquered 4 systems in the Outer Rim. The holographic display showed the extent of Nexari expansion. Unlike the previous species we had encountered, the Nexari weren't isolated or defensive. They were an established military power with a clear ideology of conquest through superior force. Traditional military response would require mobilizing the combined fleets of all member species, Admiral Kethvar continued. Casualty projections exceed 2 million beings across all species. What do we know about Nexari culture? Sarah asked. She had been promoted to Admiral following her success in diplomatic missions, but she insisted on field assignments rather than command positions. Dr. Yuan, the Council's xenopsychologist, activated additional displays. The Nexari society is built around a concept they call strength proving. Individual worth is determined by one's ability to defeat others in direct conflict. Their entire civilization is organized as a hierarchy based on combat victories. So, diplomacy would be seen as weakness? I asked. Worse than weakness. In Nexari culture, attempting negotiation instead of fighting is considered evidence of fundamental genetic inferiority. Sarah studied the tactical displays thoughtfully. What about their expansion pattern? Are they targeting specific resources or territories? That's the puzzling aspect, Dr. Yuan replied. They're not taking resources or establishing colonies. They defeat the local forces, make detailed records of the battle, and then withdraw. It's as if conquest itself is the objective, not territorial gain. I felt a familiar sensation, the same recognition I had experienced during the Drachmarie encounter when Sarah identified their structures as breeding facilities rather than fortresses. There was something about the Nexari behavior that suggested deeper motivations. They're not conquering territory, I said slowly. They're conquering proof. Explain, Admiral Kethvar ordered. In Valonian military theory, we have a concept called victory validation. Warriors who doubt their own strength seek increasingly difficult opponents to prove their worth. The Nexari aren't expanding for resources. They're expanding to prove they can defeat anyone. Sarah nodded thoughtfully, which means they're not confident about their strength. They're trying to convince themselves of it. Dr. Thekmar, who had become our permanent Drachmarie liaison, pulsed with understanding. A species experiencing strength anxiety. They compel others to fight because combat is their only method of self-validation. But that creates a tactical opportunity, Sarah continued. If their real need is proof of strength, we might be able to provide that proof without the casualties of traditional warfare. Admiral Kethvar's scales shifted to a skeptical pattern. Admiral Martinez, the Nexri have explicitly stated that they will accept only military defeat or complete surrender. They've rejected every diplomatic communication. Because we've been offering them what we wanted to give, not what they needed to receive, Sarah replied. They need to prove their strength. What if we let them? The briefing room fell silent as the implications of Sarah's suggestion became clear. She was proposing to let the Nexri win battles in order to satisfy their cultural need for victory validation. You're suggesting we intentionally lose military engagements? I asked. I'm suggesting we provide them with victories that satisfy their cultural requirements without actually compromising our strategic position. Dr. Ewan leaned forward with interest. A fascinating concept. Therapeutic combat designed to address their underlying psychological needs rather than achieve territorial objectives. Over the following weeks, Sarah assembled the most unusual military task force in galactic history. Instead of the largest and most powerful vessels available, she requested older ships with skeleton crews, defensive specialists, and volunteers who were willing to participate in what she termed constructive defeat. I found myself assigned as her strategic advisor, working to design battle scenarios that would provide the Nexri with satisfying victories while minimizing actual casualties and strategic losses. The key is understanding what constitutes a meaningful victory in their culture, Sarah explained as we reviewed potential engagement scenarios. They need to defeat opponents who fight back effectively, but ultimately lose due to Nexri superiority. This is incredibly dangerous, I pointed out. We're asking our people to deliberately put themselves in positions where they could be killed or captured. Yes, which means we need volunteers who understand that this mission requires a different type of courage than we've demonstrated before. The volunteer response surprised everyone. Ship's crews from 17 different species requested assignment to the task force. Among them were 3 Drachmarie research vessels whose crews wanted to study Nexri behavior during combat, for Corthani gravitation manipulation ships interested in testing their defensive technologies, and even 2 Nexri defectors who had escaped their empire because they questioned the ideology of strength through conquest. Why do you wish to participate in this mission? Sarah asked one of the defectors, a being named Kextar who looked like a cross between a human and a heavily armored lizard. Because I have seen what Nexri culture does to those who cannot prove their strength, Kextar replied through the translation system. They are discarded, exiled, or killed. There are millions of us in hidden refugee communities throughout the galaxy. If your approach works, it could free them. Our first engagement with the Nexri fleet took place in the disputed Altair system. Sarah's task force consisted of 12 vessels deliberately configured to appear threatening while actually prioritizing crew survival over combat effectiveness. The Nexri fleet that responded consisted of 47 ships, each one a masterwork of aggressive design built for overwhelming firepower rather than tactical flexibility. This is Admiral Sarah Martinez of the Galactic Council Defense Force. Sarah transmitted as the fleets approached engagement range. You are in violation of Council space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The Nexri response was immediate and exactly what we had hoped for. Inferior beings. We are Commander Vexthal of the Nexri Empire. Prepare to demonstrate your weakness through glorious defeat. The battle that followed was carefully choreographed, but genuinely dangerous. Sarah's ships fought with real weapons and legitimate tactics, but their objective wasn't to win. Instead, each vessel was tasked with demonstrating specific capabilities that would impress the Nexri before succumbing to overwhelming force. The Drachmarie research vessels used their biological adaptation capabilities to survive Nexri weapons longer than expected, forcing the enemy to develop new attack patterns. The Corthani ships demonstrated gravitational manipulation techniques that confused Nexus targeting systems and required creative tactical responses. Human vessels showed superior coordination and adaptability, making the Nexus work harder for their victories. Most importantly, every crew fought bravely and skillfully before eventually being overwhelmed by superior numbers rather than superior individual capability. Council vessels disabled. Came reports from each ship as they withdrew with superficial damage and no casualties. Nexus forces have achieved tactical superiority. Commander Vexthol's response was illuminating. You fought better than expected. Your defeat required significant effort. This was exactly the validation the Nexus needed. They had proven their strength against opponents who fought back effectively, requiring them to demonstrate actual tactical skill rather than simply overpowering helpless targets. Over the following months, Sarah's task force engaged Nexus fleets 17 times, losing every battle but learning more about Nexus culture with each encounter. The pattern that emerged was fascinating. The Nexus were genuinely skilled warriors, but their cultural emphasis on strength proving had isolated them from other species and prevented them from learning alternative approaches to conflict resolution. They had never encountered opponents who fought courageously but weren't trying to destroy them in return. We do not understand your purpose, Commander Vexthul finally transmitted after the 9th engagement. You fight with skill and courage, but you do not seek to prove superiority through our destruction. What do you gain from these encounters? Sarah's response marked the beginning of the most unusual diplomatic breakthrough in galactic history. We gain the knowledge that courage exists in many forms. You have proven your strength in battle. Can you prove your wisdom through conversation? The challenge was perfectly calibrated for Nexus psychology. Sarah had acknowledged their combat superiority while suggesting that true strength might include additional capabilities they hadn't yet demonstrated. You propose a different form of strength proving? I propose that the strongest beings are those who can choose their battles rather than being compelled to fight all of them. This concept was revolutionary for the Nexus. Their entire culture was built around the idea that strength meant never backing down from conflict. Sarah was suggesting that the ultimate expression of strength might be the ability to choose when conflict was necessary. The negotiations that followed were conducted according to Nexus protocols for strength dialogue, a formal process where ideas were tested through intellectual combat rather than physical warfare. Sarah's team included philosophers, strategists, and cultural experts from multiple species, each one prepared to defend their concepts against Nexus challenges. You claim that voluntary cooperation demonstrates strength, Commander Vexthul argued during one session. But cooperation is only necessary when individual capability is insufficient. Superior beings require no assistance. Dr. Thekmar responded to this challenge. Our species was superior in biological adaptation. We required no assistance to expand across many worlds. Yet cooperation with humans has made us capable of achievements we never imagined alone. Strength that cannot grow is finite weakness. The Nexus were forced to consider the possibility that their definition of strength was actually limiting their potential rather than maximizing it. The intellectual battles were as intense as the physical ones had been, but they produced different results. Instead of ending with clear victory or defeat, the Nexus began experiencing something their culture had never encountered: collaborative thinking that made all participants stronger. This is unexpected, Commander Vexthul admitted after a particularly intense philosophical exchange. We came to prove our superiority through your defeat. Instead, we have discovered enhancement through your partnership. Sarah smiled, that familiar expression. Sometimes the greatest victory is discovering that you don't need to win. The transformation of the Nexus took longer than our previous diplomatic successes, but it was also more profound. Instead of simply joining galactic civilization, they began developing entirely new concepts of strength based on the ability to build rather than destroy. Their warrior skills were redirected toward exploration and protection rather than conquest. Nexary fleets became rapid response forces for emergency situations throughout the galaxy, proving their strength by saving lives rather than taking them. Standing before the Galactic Council today, I reflected on everything I had learned about courage during my time working with humans. I had begun by thinking courage meant facing danger without fear. I had learned that it actually meant choosing to face danger despite fear. But the deepest lesson was that courage was not just an individual quality. It was something that could be shared, taught, and used to transform enemies into allies. The humans had shown me that the highest expression of courage wasn't winning battles, but making battles unnecessary. Ambassador Zethkar, Admiral Kethvar, said, "Please present your recommendations for the pending first contact with the Hegemony Alliance." I activated the holographic display, showing another hostile species that was threatening galactic peace. But, unlike my younger self, I no longer saw an enemy to be defeated. "I recommend we begin by trying to understand what they truly need," I said. "Because sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is offer someone exactly what they're really fighting for." The humans had taught me that courage wasn't about being strong enough to destroy your enemies. It was about being wise enough to transform them into friends. That was the true meaning of courage I had learned fighting alongside humans. Not the courage to face death, but the courage to choose life. Not just for yourself, but for everyone, including those who consider themselves your enemies. In the end, that was the most human lesson of all. That courage shared multiplies, while courage hoarded diminishes. The humans had given me their courage not by keeping it, but by teaching me to find my own. And now it was my turn to pass that courage forward to whatever species we encountered next who needed to learn that there was a different way to be strong.